Michael, this is big, and I saw Tom Henderson tweet this out, that it was coming, and I was happy to see he finally put it up yesterday. Context around Assassin's Creed Shadows delay. Let's get into Tom Henderson's little blurb here over at Insider Gaming. Last week, Ubisoft announced that Assassin's Creed Shadows would be delayed from its intended November release date to February of 2025. While the announcement was somewhat of a shock publicly, internally, it was expected and desperately needed. Ubisoft announced that the game was delayed to polish and refine the experience. In its earnings update, the company further claimed that the delay was due to, quote, the learning from the Star Wars Outlaws release, end quote. Both claims are true, but beyond a few short words, internally the developers have been pushing for a delay for the best part of a few months. They knew, right? Which had fallen on deaf ears until the release of Outlaws. Yves Guillemot pointed out that internal memo that Star Wars Outlaws initial sales proved, well, softer than expected. While Guillemot pointed out that the critics rated the game 76 out of 100 on Metacritic, I think it's also important to note that the user score is 5.4 out of 10. Yeah, take note of that one. Although I wasn't given the figure on what Ubisoft anticipated Outlaws to sell within its first month, the game has just surpassed 1 million units sold at the time of writing. Its performance has seemingly caused alarm bells to ring at HQ, which not only led to the approval of Assassin's Creed Shadows being delayed for Q1 2025, but to finally putting games back on Steam, a request that every Ubisoft team has been pushing for years. So, but dude, I don't understand why they wouldn't do that in the first place. You're a third-party company. You want your games to be everywhere.
Yeah.
Unless you have some exclusive deal going on with PlayStation or Xbox. Dude, get them in as many hands as possible on day one and get everybody in. Makes sense to me, but either way. So, why was Shadows delayed? It's a complicated question without a single answer, but it boils down to a strict development timeline, polishing and addressing the Japanese community's culture and historical accuracy concerns. Yep. But first, let me address some of the wild rumors about Yasuke. He's not going to be removed. However, sources have said that the team has been actively addressing many of the historical and cultural concerns which started before the game's reveal following external playtests and were accelerated further following the game's initial reveal and mass feedback. This includes changing some of Yasuke's story and how he's portrayed in the game, fixing architectural details, and ensuring that the game is historically grounded while fitting it into Assassin's Creed universe. Fundamentally, though, there are issues that should have been caught internally before the game's reveal, especially given Ubisoft's strict asset approval process. As for how these issues fell through the cracks, I'm told that historical experts were brought onto the project much later than usual for a project of this magnitude, and miscommunication between teams and cutting corners when it came to approval process of assets to meet the deadline were also at play. As for the game's polish and issues with bugs, it's pretty self-explanatory. The game is currently not at the stage it needs to be for release, and I'm told that there have been some tweaks to some gameplay mechanics and elements that are going to take time to incorporate. While some of these issues were highlighted in recent playtests and mock reviews, these are end of development issues that will take a little longer. Of course, these are not new issues for the team. 7 developers working on the project said they have been pushing for a delay for some time, and their situation had been heard at other studios in the company. Ultimately, though, the delay comes down to a strict development timeline and the need to address issues caused by the set timeline. As for why HQ continues to ignore the developers on almost every level, Ubisoft's executive committee and board of directors will decide in their review. Although 80% of 40 Ubisoft developers think this ends in no change or layoffs, but that's another story for an internal issue over another time. Michael, there's a lot to unpack here, buddy. Where do you want to start?
Oh, I mean, I think you briefly talked on it there with the Steam thing, right? That's wild that it comes out that Ubisoft teams have been basically requesting it. The only logic is it seems like every company, for whatever reason, thinks Steam is dying, right? I think Borderlands at one point said Steam's going to die. They tried to partner with the Epic Games Store. Now the new Borderlands is going to be back on Steam when it comes out. If for whatever reason, everyone thinks they're smarter than Steam, stop. as you said, if you want your game to be everywhere, put it on Steam. If you want to have some third-party app like EA has, I guess, I don't think gamers like that. Again, just stick to Steam. Steam's not going anywhere. That's the first one. Everything else is just, I mean, this just feels like what we've been talking about with Ubisoft externally for years finally coming out, right? The fact that they were rushing this game. The fact that corners were cut when it came to putting out assets. That historical experts were brought on later, right? This just seems like we've been saying for the better part of this year until last year that Ubisoft is just getting sloppy with their games. And it finally came out. And good thing they finally realized it, right? Because imagine, with all the controversy already surrounding Assassin's Creed Shadows, if it comes out on its scheduled date and there's a ton of bugs, there needs to be a ton of day one patches. That could have killed the Assassin's Creed franchise forever, and that could have potentially killed Ubisoft, because this is really their bread and butter title. So I'm glad they're listening to them. I think there's a lot of pressure that this game needs to be essentially flawless on release in just terms of bugs. I don't need anything else. There's always going to be the controversy behind the scenes, but this game cannot have a day one patch, Drew. It cannot have a, hey, if you got it early, there's a chance your PS5 save gets completely wiped because of the day one patch we're putting out. Like, they need to nail all of that. We'll see if they can do it, but at least they finally recognized it. But then you get to the end, Drew, and it says 80% of the developers think nothing is going to change. Just feels like a matter of time until one of these Ubisoft games goes so completely wrong that the very limited goodwill they have left is completely washed down the drain.
Yeah, I've heard there's definitely some troubled times right now at Ubisoft, right? Internally. I've been speaking with a couple people within the industry, and things are not good over at Ubisoft, which sucks, right? It's one of our favorite studios. Like, the games they make are the games that really kind of speak to me. Assassin's Creed is a franchise I've followed and played for years, played for decades now at this point. Whew, I'm old. But it's one of those, dude, this is, like you say, this is their bread and butter. They cannot risk screwing this up. Dude, Star Wars should have been a smash hit.
Yeah.
Absolutely should have been a no-brainer. It's a Star Wars licensed game. Why not? There's a couple different things we can get into, but that's for a whole other show. But at least they learned from that to go, hey, maybe we should back this up. So I'm glad that they're taking another look. They are reorganizing the story so it matches Yasuke much better now compared to where they had set up, because they have ticked off a lot of the Japanese community when it comes to what's going on in Assassin's Creed Shadows. If you really want to dive deep, like, there's got to be some give and go as well. Dude, at the end of the day, this is a game. Like, it's just a game. Like, we're just making this up, playing some electronic character on screen. Like, it's a game. But if you want to be accurate, then you got to pay attention as well, right? If you're going to do the claim, then, man, come to the place and make sure you do it right and bring in the historical attributes and those historians early so that you aren't missing stuff. Dude, they did it with Mirage and they nailed it for the most part, right? A couple of little things here, give or take, because you have to, because it's a game and it should be fun versus being completely historical, and then it wouldn't be that fun, right? So there's got to be some give and take. Polish has got to be a priority as well at this point too. This is, like you say, their bread and butter.